crazy mother. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the NattFitness Method. I'm your host, Nicholas Natt, and you are tuned in today with a very special guest who I cannot wait to talk to you about. And listen, when you think about the concepts of overcoming hardships, adversities, ultimately to turn something that's really negative into a positive, it takes a special kind of a person, it takes a special kind of a mindset. And not only have we brought somebody who's actually done that, but we found somebody who's taken that approach, been able to formulate it in multiple dimensions of her life. And because of that, she's been able to have the same level of impact, but monumentally in multiple parts of her life. She is an IFBB Bikini pro. She is also a renowned entrepreneur to many businesses and started many businesses that are still now open today. She is the epitome of somebody who has foregone a rough childhood from the state to the government to the continent level and been able to find that and harvest it into gems. And ultimately, she serves now to be an inspiration not only for women in their later years who can embody beauty as well as appeal, but she also is the counselor and the number one performance coach to many of the best and top performers in multiple aspects, such as poker and acting, just to name a couple. None other, I am happy to introduce Gidget Migliaccio. Gidget, thanks so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. It's awesome.
It sounds so good.
I gotta tell you, when we had our meeting, what we ended up talking about completely blew me away, from everything about how you were born and how you have lived your life into who you are now, and just basically all the steps across the way. So I'm excited to kind of get into this and just share the concepts and really just the stories, right, about how you were able to formulate this. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, I want to jump in, and obviously I want to give people a little bit of background, right, because there's so much of you, and there's so much that we're going to get a chance to uncover. I feel like it's important that people have just a fundamental background about where you were. So obviously, you're not from the States, Gidget. You were actually born in Zimbabwe, which struck me off guard because I would not have taken that by connecting and just looking at you. So why don't you tell me a little bit about that, when you were born in Zimbabwe, and ultimately how you ended up getting to the States around 1993, I want to say. Is that right? Awesome.
So I was born in Zimbabwe during the apartheid regime, which was basically segregation. You know, they said it was race, but a lot of it also had to do with the color of your skin. You know, the lighter skinned you were, the more advantages you had, and the darker skinned you were, the less advantages you had. And back then it was the law. You know, we were segregated. There was the African community, there was the European community, and the African being black, European being white. And in the middle, we had the Indians and the coloreds. And I was born and raised as a colored. Both my mom and dad were colored. And what colored meant was really a mixture between African and European. And then also, a lot of us had Indian and Asian and other mixes in there. You know, our schools that we went to were colored. The neighborhoods we lived in were colored. The grocery store we went to was colored. You know, it was just our identity. That's who we were. And it was an identity that I carried with me throughout my entire life and been very, very proud of, because I felt identifying as a colored person, and I know the term here in America is a derogatory term, and sometimes that kind of makes me sad because in Africa it wasn't. When I was growing up, colored meant a unity of black and white coming together. At some point in their lives, two people came together and had a child, and that child was considered a colored child. So we were able to identify growing up with both the white and the black side of our family. That was our identity. So the apartheid regime was just a government that was put in place by the British. And, it's that old saying, conquer, separate, divide and conquer, and that's pretty much what they tried to do to, all Zimbabweans growing up, was to kind of separate us. And it was sad because a lot of us didn't really want to be separated, but we were forced to be separated. It was the law, African people couldn't go to European schools. Colored people, if you're a dark-skinned colored person, you couldn't go to a white school. It was very tough within my family because a couple of my brothers were very dark-skinned, and my mom looked more African than she did white. But yet the rest of my mom's family looked more white than they did African. My dad's side of the family looked more African but my dad looked more white. So it's like the two opposites in the family that kind of came together. And even growing up within our own family unit, there was this segregation that took place. Like I would see my light-skinned brother that had blonde hair and blue eyes get favored more than my dark-skinned brother with curly black hair and dark skin, even within our own family. And that's because that's the way we were raised and almost brainwashed in a way to believe that the lighter you were, the more superior you were. So just schools, jobs, education, everything was segregated. And we didn't know any different. It's just the life the only life that we knew. It's only as things progressed and we went through a civil war and, we literally had to fight for the freedom from, the oppressive British government, but not so much the British government because we won that, but the apartheid government that had been put in place. It was fighting an entire system that had been there for so long because us as a people, we didn't want it anymore. So that's the beginning of everything for me.
It's really unique. Obviously, my parents were born here in the States, but they're both born in the later 50s. And so they were raised in the South. And this is during the civil rights movement here in America, right? So we had our own civil war within the States. And obviously this place is happening. This is starting to happen where it's separate and equal, but equal rights aren't there. And it's unique that you say that because in the education that I received growing up from my parents and also just part of the Black, culture and the Black community is that it really was segregated, right? It was whites and Blacks. And if you were mixed because your mom was white and your dad was Black or vice versa, you were the bastard child, right? But it was automatically coloreds and whites. And there wasn't really this dichotomy of really there being Blacks and coloreds and then whites and kind of having this trifecta because you, Gidget, had to face a lot of turmoil growing up that has helped cultivate this mindset because there would be a time when you were given better treatment if Blacks were around to the whites because you were technically superior because of your race, because of your color. Mm-hmm. But then you were also refuted by the Blacks being half Black yourself because you weren't a purebred. And so what was that like, having this kind of tug of war, like you said, even with your family, where you kind of only fit in with the people who were just like you because you were ostracized from much of your own on both sides?
Mm-hmm. Well, there were a lot of light-skinned people that would pretend to be light-skinned colored people that would pretend to be white so they could get more advantages. Even my dad would fill out his work application and put white down because then he could qualify to get certain jobs because even jobs were allocated. There were certain jobs that Black people got, white people got, and colored people got. So my dad would put down white so he could get certain jobs. And my parents put me in a white school because they wanted me to have more advantages. I had a very difficult time in a white school because I was raised, and when I was raised very early on, I started speaking Zulu, which was in Ndebele. And so I was raised with a very, very strong African identity. And I don't know if it came from I think a lot of it came from my mother and my great-grandmother, Bessie Moffat. So I grew up speaking Zulu, and I just would automatically, if I saw a Black person anywhere, would speak to them like they were part of my family. So when I would be at school and I would be talking and laughing with, a Black guy that was cutting the grass or a Black woman that was cleaning the toilets, the white kids would see this, and it started a whole bunch of issues for me where I was being called a kafir lover, which is like being called a nigger lover. And it started issues for me where I got into a lot of physical fights. I spoke to you about this. I lost a lot of the bone on the side.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I actually want to have the opportunity for people to, and not to cut you off, Gidget, but that's an incredible story. If you guys can't see, there's actually a mark.
Yeah, indent, right, yeah.
They can't see it. Your skin looks immaculate, but there's a mark there. But why don't you tell the story, Gidget, about what ended up?
There was this tap with some rocks underneath it, and I went and I opened the tap and I drank some water. And this girl that had been a white girl that had been picking on me for a while, as I walked away, another girl went to drink water after me, and she said, "Oh, don't drink out of that tap. The kafir lover just drank out of there." I was raised in a very tough upbringing to begin with. We weren't raised to verbally express our feelings. Like back home, we were beating the hell out of each other. And even with the other kids, it's like we always express our emotions. If somebody said something, we just started a fight. So I, without even thinking about it, just like went after this girl and attacked her and grabbed her by the hair and took her over to the tap and slammed her face in the tap. And then in the rocks and opened the tap on her water, and I was just yelling at her and screaming. And then I just took off running. So, of course, the next day when I went back to school, they expelled me for 4 weeks. And I didn't want to tell my parents about it, so I literally just skipped school and never went. But there came a time when I had to go back to school again. And I'd heard all these stories from some of the other kids that they were planning on, attacking me at some point or beating me up or whatever, or retaliating. And I used to walk home through this dirt path. If I went down along the road to get home, it would take me like 2 hours to walk home. But if I cut through this, in Africa, we call it the bush. If I cut through this like bush area, it would take me, probably 30, 40 minutes to get home. And I wasn't going to walk 2 hours home every day because I was afraid of these kids, but I knew it was coming. And I was walking, I remember it had been raining that day and it was very muddy. And I just felt myself get attacked from behind, and right away somebody pushed my head down onto the ground and was like banging my head up and down. And that was on this side of my face. And there just happened to be a rock because it was like a dirt path. There just happened to be a rock right there. I mean, there's a lot of rocks in our dirt paths, but it was just hit my face. And I felt like just somebody like some pain in my back, and they were hitting me and punching me from behind. And it happened pretty fast. I heard the voices. I actually know who the kids were because I recognized 3 of the voices, and there were 5 of them. So when I got home, my whole entire face was swollen, and I didn't realize, but I had a white shirt on, and I had a burgundy tunic over the white shirt, so I didn't notice any difference. It's only when I took the tunic off, I realized I had blood on the back of my shirt. And when I looked on the back of my shirt, my white shirt, I could see that somebody had actually stabbed me with a knife. So I have like 5 little knife stabs on my back. And again, my family, my dad was one of those people that if you went to him and kind of complained about something like this, he'd be like, "Don't tell me about it. Make sure you go back and get one of those kids and, beat them up one at a time." So it just wasn't going to be one of those things where I would get sympathy. So I just kind of dealt with it. It was towards the end of the school year, and I was going into high school. And I didn't go to school for the rest of it was about a month left. I never went back to school. And my parents wanted to put me in a white high school. And this is right around the time when we're gaining independence. And they're starting to merge African people into colored schools and colored kids into white schools. So everybody was very excited about going into a white school. And I refused. And I went to a colored school called Founders High School. And at that time, they merged all the African kids into the colored high school. So we ended up going from like pretty much, 100% like colored and Indian high school to probably it ended up being 60 to 80% of all the African kids now had an opportunity to come to school. So even in class, it was very difficult for me to learn because a lot of the African students that were coming in were behind, and a lot of them didn't speak English very well. So I was always translating, trying to explain things to everybody. And that was pretty much my high school. So I realized I wasn't going to get much of an education in class because I knew that I was behind in everything. So I started playing a lot of sports. And that's when I started just living on the track. I was on the high school track. I made the gymnastics team. I made the swim team, but I was a lousy swimmer. I don't know what I was doing in that pool. I think I was drowning most of the time.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
seems like I was good, but it's because none of the other African kids could swim.
there's, there's, there's humor in that, even though it's
Yeah.
not funny, but there's a lot of humor in that. I
Yeah.
want to go back and circle back with something you talked about, Gidget, because you're starting to get into this concept behind, how you got into sports. And ultimately, I think that's going to be a great transition to talk about how that ultimately transitioned you in the weight room and you were able to build and cultivate the physique, very admirable physique, and the work that you've been able to do. But prior to that, you talked about your upbringing and how that was tough, right? So most people have a hard time even like fathoming. I couldn't imagine growing up in suburbia. Again, my dad was a professional ball player. To answer your question, why do I like basketball? But he was a professional ball player. So to grow up in suburbia and come home with blood on my shirt, let alone being jumped, but have blood on my shirt, my mom would have killed somebody. And so I think, to not get that kind of parental compassion, that nurturing that, we all kind of crave and look to our parents for, especially a dad. A dad is supposed to be the defender. He's the avenger, and mom is supposed to be the nurturer and kind of soothe the pain. And you didn't have that. And so could you give me a background a little bit?
Yeah.
What it was like, with your parents and having so many of you guys and how you used to make these treks to your grandma's house was ultimately what chartered your athleticism because, you basically had to, right?
I think, my parents had a very, they were raised obviously during the whole Civil War issue. And my mom was 13 when she got pregnant. By the time she was 22, she already had 5 children. So I think that alone must have been very tough on her. I remember when I was born, my dad was recruited into the army. At the age of 18, it was mandatory to go into the army and fight in the Civil War. The Soviet Union at the time was financing a lot of the African people fighting in the war. So suddenly they were armed and they had the ability to come into the country and fight against the white people because now they had the arms. But there was a lot of bloodshed because of this, and a lot of the government recruited all the colored men to fight in a war against the African men, and a lot of the colored men didn't want to do this because you're talking about fighting against your own family members, and you're talking about fighting for a cause that you don't really believe in, right. So I think that alone really messed with a lot of the mentality of a lot of the colored men. I think it was very tough. My father watched his cousins step on a landmine and have his legs blown off. He watched his best friend get killed. And when you see stuff like that happen, he talked about watching, I get so upset thinking about it. He talked about watching women and children getting raped and killed because there wasn't only a black-white war going on. There was also a tribal war going on. So there were the northern Africans, which were the Shona, and the southern Africans, which were the Matabele, were the 2 main tribes. So the northern and the Shona didn't want the Matabele to take over. So at one point, the Shona, there was a massacre in Zimbabwe, in Bulawayo, which was the southern, where most of the Matabele were, and over 20,000 Matabele were slaughtered, and killed. And it was kept very, very hush-hush. But my father talked about, just seeing a lot of women and children get killed and raped and just stuff like that. When he came out of the war, I think it changed him. I think it changed him a lot. At one time he was actually thrown in jail while he was in the army. But, both my parents started drinking a lot, and, doing drugs on a regular basis. Like literally from the age of about 5 years old, I used to take care of my siblings because from Friday to Sunday, my parents would I would go look for my mom and dad at the bars. Or like if there was any type of bar close by, I would go find them. And they would go straight from work to a bar to go drink. And I would go get money from my father so that I could go home and buy, usually I always got the same amount of money and I bought the same thing, which was bread and eggs and usually a Coke and some chips for myself or a Crunchy or something because I like chocolate. But I would go buy the same thing because when I was younger, I could just cook eggs and I would go home and cook for my younger brothers and my sister. And so there was also a lot of domestic violence involved. There was a lot of, my father was, physically abusive, towards my mother, so there were times when I would get in the middle of the physical violence, and my father would slam me up against the wall because I'd jump on his back, or he'd push me out of the way. And when I say I watched, my mother get punched and kicked and, beaten up and blood everywhere, and me constantly trying to get in the middle and also trying to protect my younger siblings and push them out of the way. So it just, from Friday to Sunday, was just like a horror movie at our house. I hate to even put it that way, but it really was. And then from Monday through Friday was like normal. We'd go back to this normal, going to school and pretending and acting like nothing happened. And then Friday would start all over again. Police banging on the door because my mother's getting beaten up. But pretty much we moved downtown to an apartment that my grandmother used to live in, and she moved out. And she moved to the other side of town. And when my father was physically beating up on my mother, I used to run from our apartment because we didn't have a phone, to my grandmother's apartment. And it was a long run because I wanted my grandmother to come stop my father or call the police because she had a phone. And so I used to be exhausted. My chest would be burning. I'd be so tired, but I knew if I didn't get there, I was always so afraid one day my father was going to kill my mother. He broke her ribs, he broke her jaw, he just black eyes the next day. And, it was just awful to have to go through that. But for me, every step I took running was that last step of like, oh my God, my mother's not going to be okay. So, and also I had gone through an incident where my mother's sister had been, raped and strangled and brutally murdered. So that was always in the back of my head. Maybe my father's going to be in a rage and he's going to strangle my mother, or crazy stuff, because the fights were very bad. But because of that, I used to get out of the house every day. I started running at 6 o'clock, and I started running because I wanted to be faster, and I wanted to be able to get to my grandmother's house faster. And that was one of the things that really motivated me to take my running to a whole nother level. Even like I started going to the gym and lifting weights. One of the reasons was because I wanted to have a stronger upper body for gymnastics, but really deep down it was because I was very petite and I wanted to be stronger. Like if anybody tried to beat me up again, I'd be able to protect myself. One day I'd be able to be strong enough to stop my father from, beating my mother. So everything for me was about being stronger and about being faster, to protect myself, to protect my mother, to protect my siblings. And that's kind of like how I think my athleticism, when I really focus on something, it's something very deep down within me that pushes me and motivates me, because it's that fear, it's just that fear of things happening, which in my case, they were happening. It wasn't like I was afraid of nothing happening. I was afraid of what was going to happen every single weekend in our house, every weekend.
That's it's really unique because, you talk about coming from so much trauma in and of itself already that has streamlined and really come from the government side. And, talking about your dad and a lot of these people who were victimized because they were forced to choose a side and sort of this tug of war. Naturally, stress is going to exert itself, right? And many times, like you said, if we as people don't have the right resources or tools, or we don't know the proper strategies on how to get help or cope with stress. And again, whether that's because the time isn't there culturally, it's not available, or finances, it's not an option, people ultimately end up just doing what the best they can. And so it's hard because, I know from our conversation, it sounds like, you've definitely forgiven your dad and you found, the understanding behind why that was. But, it's a horrible thing to have that happen to your mother, and in part have that happen to him where he turned in that way. There's silver lining in it, from you running back and forth and having to take such a strong affinity role as, the actual guardian for your siblings, that really helped you cultivate some really good things. And so what I'm really excited about and really eager to hear is ultimately the story about how you really got into athletics, because the whole time it wasn't that you were so adamant about getting into fitness. You weren't the kind of person that, had a superhero on your wall. It's like, oh my gosh, I want to be like that track athlete or that bodybuilding athlete. You kind of ran your ass off to make sure that you were saving lives, but that ended up working for you. So I think the first sport, and I could be wrong, was track, right?
Yeah.
Track. So I love this story. How did you get quick burning feet?
I used to go, we had ours, I don't know about the tracks here, but ours was like a dirt track, the 400 meters. And I used to go, I watched for like, oh gosh, a couple of weeks. And I asked the coach, I said, hey, is there any way I can join the athletic team? And he's like, no, you got to try out and you got to train, and tryouts are over for the year. And, no, you can't. So I said to her, kept watching. I used to go practice on my own when they were done. And they would run, the 1,600 meters or the 100 meters or the relays or whatever. And so I went back again and I asked him again. And he said no again. I was like, shucks. He said, you can try out next year when they start next year. But I was like, next year, that's like, for me, next year felt like forever. It was probably, I don't know how long ago, but it felt like years. It was probably only a few months, but I was like,
eternity. Well, yeah, an eternity, right?
So it was really funny because when I started running, there were a lot of times when I went to school and I didn't even have school shoes. So even when I was, like I mentioned, going to the white school, there was the other dimension of getting teased a lot. I used to have very long hair, and I used to use the end of my mom's pantyhose as elastic bands on my hair. And sometimes I had to go to school with like these little white tennis shoes, which are just very cheap tennis shoes that you could buy, little rubber tennis shoes, because I didn't have black leather shoes and I couldn't afford it. So I remember having these white tennis shoes on in high school. In Founders, they didn't give me that much. They didn't tease me about it. But it had a slippery rubber underneath, and I knew I couldn't run with them. And I had learned to run barefoot. So I remember thinking, I don't know what made me do it. I just took off my tennis shoes, and he was lining all the athletes up. And as he blew the whistle, I started walking towards them, and he's like, hey, where are you going? And I just ignored him. And he just blew the whistle right as I got to the line, and I took off running with everybody. So when you run the 1,600 meters, you run at a steady pace for about three laps.
Right.
I was used to sprinting, so I had developed a very high endurance. And also my dad had chickens. We always had chickens in the backyard, and we always grew our own vegetables. So I had a very high diet of protein. I ate eggs. We ate eggs and chicken, curry chicken, roast chicken, stewed chicken. But without knowing it, I had a very high protein diet and lots of fresh vegetables. So I was able to literally just take off in front of everybody and run at a much faster pace than everybody. And even when everybody was catching up with me, when they started running full pace, I was already ahead. And I actually won the race. And he came up to me and he was just dying. He's like, where did you learn to run like this? You're such a little thing. You're so petite. Your little short legs. I was like, I don't have short legs. So he was just dying. But I actually won the race, and he put me on the team right away. So that's how I made the athletic team.
Sometimes you got to break the rules, right? I think it was Arnold. It breaks the law, but you got to break the rules. And I can imagine his face, when you like line up, and he's like, "What?" It's kind of funny because I like to think about like Forrest Gump, the movie with Tom Hanks. It really is. You're kind of in this position where you kind of have this difficult situation. With him, it was the braces, and you, it's kind of this livelihood that ends up being a silver lining, and you discover it. And like, there's a scene in that movie, I haven't seen it in so long, where I think it's the Alabama football team. So they're the Roll Tide, they're doing the recruitment, and they're like doing the tryouts and the scouting. And he just like randomly runs through the practice field because he doesn't know any better. And they're like, who the hell is that? And I just see this look on your coach's face where his like jaw is probably the ground, like, what? So that's good.
I died when I did it though, but I was so determined to win. My face was burning, like it was just felt like it was on fire. My head was spinning. He's trying to talk to me, and I'm trying to not bend over. I'm trying to stay up and breathe. And I was like, "What are you saying to me right now?" But
it's funny because it's ambition, right? when you have like a
mindset.
fire, or you have something like that hot under your ass, that's like, yo, you gotta perform. Like, you
Yeah.
have something to prove.
Like 4 weeks of watching and getting told no. And I was like, oh, I want to do this.
Yeah, that's a good feel. It's good leverage. So this is awesome. So shortly after track, obviously you have this background, like you had mentioned. You wanted to get strong so that you could be in a position where you are able to defend yourself. But naturally, with athletics, especially in high school, there's sort of this appeal behind weight training. So you started weight training partially for getting strong, also to improve your ability to be a more valuable asset in whatever athletics. And so it's kind of funny because you had already mentioned this earlier. You joined gymnastics, the swim team. By the way, just a random question. What strokes did you do in high school? Like, what did you swim?
I was lousy at all of them, breaststroke, backstroke. It was just, but there was no one else to put on the team. Colored kids weren't big in swimming, and African kids, there were no African kids swimming. So it was desperate.
Well, it's a funny joke because it's kind of true. It's just like you don't really see.
I actually learned to swim in the white school. And I got banned from the swim team because as I was diving into the pool, the same girl said something derogatory towards me. I can't even remember what it was. And instead of diving into my lane, I dived on top of her. I had this teacher that had to jump in and separate me. So I got taken off the team. But I didn't
well, I would say so. You jumped in a pool trying to drown a girl. Not that she didn't deserve it, but, they got to pretend like they care at least.
Yeah.
So awesome.
He was a big, big fat teacher. He was not happy with me.
So Gidget, you've done some incredible stuff, right? So you're joining these sports, you're really getting into it. And in 1993, you end up coming to America, obviously for fashion. You're doing all of these different things. You knew you wanted to move here. And it's not that I want to skip over that, but somehow you're in a gym and you're working out because this is part of what you do. You believe in living a very healthy lifestyle, right? And from the conversations we had, all of that, right? Like, when you eat well, how empowered you are, from the mindset that you cultivated from all the hard things growing up that you've already expressed, how that is easy to make that a very strong habit, and you can like plug and go, right? Well, ultimately, you were influenced to do a fitness competition, right?
Yeah.
So talk to me about how that came along and really what made you concede and actually get on stage and crush. But yeah.
So, lifting weights, I started lifting weights when I was probably about 15. I was the only girl in this really grungy kind of dark gym in Zimbabwe, and all these musclehead guys around me. And, there were pictures of Arnold and everybody on the walls. And it just became a lifestyle. I just could not imagine not going to the gym 5-6 days a week. And with that, obviously, came eating really well. And I just did it. And it was just, I never did it to physically look good. I did it because I wanted to feel strong. I wanted to feel healthy. And of course, it just paid off because the physique that I have now, I've had my entire life. I had this physique from probably 16 years old onwards, and it just hasn't changed. So I was in the gym once, and this woman is like my idol. I absolutely love her. I've always admired and looked up to her as a competitor. And that's Carol Semple.
Carol.
Yes, she was.
Yeah, we love Carol.
When Carol was competing, I was just enamored with everything that she was able to do. Her strength, her flexibility, her competitive nature. I was just blown away by her. And so I bumped into Carol and I became good friends. I bumped into Carol in the gym and she was like, wow, you look great. Look at your physique. You got shoulders, you got abs. And she said, I am doing this, I'm promoting my own show and you have to compete in it. And I was like, Carol, there's no way. I am not going to compete in a bikini, in a bodybuilding show. And she goes, no, it's like fitness bikini. It's, it's a different division. It's not as big and muscular. So I said to her, and this was like, I think on a Monday. And I said to her, when's your show? And she said to me, it's on Saturday, this coming Saturday. So I found myself showing up on Friday, which was literally about 4 or 5 days later, getting a spray tan. And I'm going to be entering this bodybuilding show tomorrow. And I had no idea what I was doing. I had no routine. All I knew is I looked really brown and really good. Because my mom has that complexion of the tan. Sure. And everything, wow, I got my mom's complexion. This is so cool. I always wanted my mom's skin, that golden, beautiful golden brown skin. I was like, oh, God. So I was like clueless. I woke up the next morning. I went to the show. There were all these bodybuilders everywhere. I was so intimidated. I was like, what am I doing here? This is so crazy. But I thought, you know what? First of all, I was very nervous. And obviously, I was like comparing myself to the figure competitors and everybody else. And I was just like, So I always have this thing where whenever I'm nervous, I tell myself, you're not nervous, Gidget. You're excited. You're excited. So I kept saying, I'm excited. I'm excited. But I still felt nervous.
Right.
I'm excited. And then I started changing my mindset. So I was standing in line waiting to go on stage. And I was like, you got this, girl. I always feel like I have two personalities. Sometimes I have one personality that's trying to sabotage me, but I have this other strong personality. So I click into whichever personality I need. And I was like, you got this, Gidget. You got it. Okay, you're going to walk on that stage and you're going to own it. And I did. And so when I did open Bikini, I think they had novice back then. I think I did novice. Whatever they had, I did everything. And I did 35, 40, and I think 45. Like whatever thing they had, I did it. And for everyone, they were like, first place is not Gidget. No, I'm kidding. First place is Gidget. Gidget. So the judge was like, and of course, first place is Gidget Migliaccio. So, but anyway, long story short, I won everything, including overall. I didn't realize what I won at the time, but Carol said to me, you got to go to nationals. And I was like, what is nationals? I said, Carol, are you sure you weren't judging? She's like, no, I had nothing to do with the judging at all. I was like joking with her. So she's like, wow, you looked amazing. You should go to nationals. And I was like, what is nationals? And she's like, it's this. But she tried to explain it to me, but I didn't really get nationals.
Right.
And a week later, I was on a plane going to a national show that I had no idea what I was doing. And I took 4th place at the national show. And I was like, I didn't win it. What happened? I should have won it. Because I always have this mindset where I want to win.
Of course.
It was only afterwards I realized that, hey, nationals is tough because all the other girls that are there are winners. So it was afterwards that I came away from it. And then I really appreciated the fact that I had taken the fourth place. And then that's when I just fell in love with the sport. I was like, I want that first place. But because when I compared my physique to the other girls, I was like, wow, some of these girls have amazing physiques. So that's when I got hungry, and that's when I just fell in love with the sport. And I was just like, oh, I want to get back on that stage. But I was 42 when I did this. So I wasn't a young competitor. I was already, up there. And so, it was obviously a very young industry, and I was competing against a lot of younger girls, but that didn't stop me. I was like,
you're going up against these wallflowers, and you even said that some of the promoters came up to you, and they're like, how's it going? And you're like, I'm not a wallflower, I'm a cougar. Those aren't the words, but that's what you said. And they were like, So I think that's awesome. No, listen, I think it's great. It just kind of goes to show you, when you do the right things consistently over a long period of time, you could be planting a seed for something that you don't even know. And like you said, Gidget, you never knew what a bikini show was, or, you're kind of in a position where you look good, but you don't have the ability to really decipher exactly what's going on because there's no preconceived notion or no particular goal. And you have to step out on faith, really. And I think it's. And
I think the most important thing is having fun. Yes. I think when I went to both those shows, I went with the mindset that I'm going to have fun. I'm going to do this because it's fun. And even now when I go to any show, my mindset is to go have a good time, to enjoy the experience, to really meet a lot of other competitors, to be in the environment, and I consider myself privileged to be in that environment amongst so many other competitors that work so hard to get there. And, you know, the outcome of what my placing is on stage is not why I do it. You know, I do it for the experience. You know, I can have expectations in my head of what I want the results to be. But I accept the outcome, you know, and I accept the outcome with a very, very positive attitude, because it's the journey for me to get on and have the, how can I even put it? Just the, what's the right word? Just the, just the ability to be able to step on the stage and compete is what is important to me. You know, there's so many people, like I grew up with my uncle, for example, that had no legs. You know, I'm always so grateful for anything that I'm able to achieve in life, you know, that this body's given me, that this mind's given me, you know. And so just being able to go through that process and step on that stage is a huge deal to me. And whatever else comes into play after that is something that I'm just grateful for, and I take it all in. You know, sometimes I watch competitors get very upset and cry after a show and get very depressed, and I kind of look at them and I don't understand why they're doing that, because it's almost like they're not enjoying the experience of getting there, and they're so focused on that first place. I feel like everyone that steps on that stage is a winner, you know. And getting a trophy or getting that first place is the icing on the cake. But really, that cake wouldn't exist. That icing wouldn't exist without the cake. You know, and the cake is so much more important. Yeah, the icing's great. We all want it. But it's that cake. You know, it's that cake that you have to enjoy.
No. It's a great analogy. You know, I think it's a great perspective. Look, I've been there. I've been that athlete who was do or die. And your stock that you put, 16, 20 weeks of hard work, dedication, preparation into boils down to an opinion of, 6 or 10 strangers. And, if you don't know exactly why you're doing something outside of winning, then it's very hard to find identity and purpose behind that, right? And so I think it can definitely relate to that, but you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, I don't think you can really do well or sustain that if you can't find passion behind that. And that takes joy. It takes something that you really have to be excited about. Just to go to the gym, like you said, and just to train, that's your lifestyle. You do that regardless if you have a show. And I think also people who tend to find really strong reasons outside of themselves, like it's something that your passion is a part of, but ultimately that purpose transcends just yourself, and it's something that you contribute. And so it's really kind of cool, because that's exactly kind of what you have going on right now. You're in the process of being an ambassador. You already are an ambassador through your examples, through the things that you've been able to do and the people you've been able to help, but you wanted to go above and beyond and create a documentary, which I know you're in the process of filming. And so talk to me a little bit about what the documentary is, but ultimately, what was your inspiration behind doing that?
Well, I decided, because I have a very busy business life, so I never had the ability to fully commit to competing on the level that I wanted to do it. I'm always training, and I'm always, dieting and staying very close. But, to compete, at the level that I wanted to compete at, you have to do several show after show after show. And I thought to myself, if I'm going to go down this journey at the age of 52, I wanted to be able to document it. And one of the main reasons I wanted to be able to document it is because I've gone through struggles in my life where I've, doubted myself, and I've had insecurities, and I've had things like that. But I've also come out at the other end where I am, very, very, I hate to say this, but it sounds conceited, very, very in love with myself, in love with the woman that I am today, very proud of myself. And I feel like there's, the other woman is still in there, and I feel like I meet other women that were like me all the time. And I feel like if I can tell my story through this documentary of my journey, just to, compete as an IFBB Bikini Pro and qualify for the Olympia, it'll be an inspirational story for other people. And it's telling people that you're never too old to take care of yourself. This body that you have is the only body that you have. It's the vehicle that will take you through your entire life. It doesn't matter it doesn't matter what your weight is. It doesn't matter how you look. None of that matters. What matters is taking care of what you've been given or where you're at in life right now. So I want to be able to tell that part of it, like to people, to the inspirational part of actually being able to take care of your body at any age. It doesn't matter. Like most people are going to look at me and go, "You're crazy wanting to qualify for the Olympia at the age of 52 and competing against girls more than half your age," But, I don't think I am. I think that this is just a dream that I have. And, every dream has the ability to become a reality. And the only person that has that choice to make that is you. And it doesn't matter what age you are, and it doesn't matter who tells you you can or can't do it. It's really, really coming to terms with whatever it is you want to do. You have to commit to it. And you have to do it. And you have to go after it. The only time dreams die is when you die. I'm not saying everybody can go, compete at this level that I'm competing at. No, but there's so many other things. I have so many other dreams. I have so many dreams. There's so much I want to achieve. There is not enough time in the day for me to achieve everything.
Well, it's a good thing because you have that level of ambition. And if you're not in a position where you're only cultivating one identity, then you're not really bound to that. Mm-hmm. And what I take from what you're saying, Gidget, if I'm wrong, definitely correct me, is like, it's a metaphor. You're going out and you're taking deliberate action to try to fulfill and live the best of not just one, but multiple dreams, right? And that might be behind multiple goals in fitness or in business. But ultimately, it's to inspire not just women, but other people, but especially women who have that mindset of it's too much or it's too late or I'm not enough. Basically, that ethos, right, that gets wrapped up and reinforced every year by certain things. And they look in the mirror and it's always the half empty. Well, here's why I can't do all of these things. And you really want to be an evangelist to inspire these people to go out and go next level in that. And so I love that. I think that that's incredible. I think it's a one thing to be an evangelist and to speak that, and no take away anything, at least on my behalf, from anybody out there doing that. But you are living it, and anybody who's ever done a show, let alone done it at the level you're at, knows that that's not really something that you can just plug and go. So to have that dream is next level ambitious. I want to make sure I have an opportunity to talk a little bit about kind of what you're into and what you do and how people can connect with you. But before that, I want to dig into one more topic if we can. And I think that this will be so big, right? So we have these conversations constantly with society, the world, friends, peers, family, and even enemies, right? And ultimately, we all know that words have power. I know that's one of the things that you strongly preach and believe, Gidget. And, if you can hear the wrong words, they can become weapons. And if you say the wrong words, they can be weapons. But if you use the words as tools and convictions, they can be the building blocks for a miracle cornerstone or an empire, right? And so what do you have to really say to the people who are in a position where they may be encountering somebody who's a naysayer or a hater or a pessimist, or ultimately just showcases their way of disbelief in your ability to be successful at whatever it is that you want to do?
Pretty much, there's a friend of mine, his name is Chris, and he's he films movies, little short films. And he has this saying on his Instagram page, and it says, impossible. But if you change it, it says, I'm possible. So it's really believing in yourself. People might construe me as arrogant or full of myself or whatever, and that doesn't bother me. I 100% believe in myself. I put myself on the highest pedestal I possibly can. I am my own queen. I am my own king. I have learned to give myself everything that I need. I take care, I satisfy all my needs mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, spiritually. I take care of what I need to take care of for myself so that I don't have to rely on anyone to give it to me. And then when they don't give it to me, I'm very disappointed in them rather than in myself. So if I don't satisfy those needs in myself, I'm disappointed in me. So I've worked very hard on all my weaknesses, and I've strengthened my weaknesses. And it never ends. You're always working. If you become a student for life, you are always trying to, improve everything about the way that I think, the way that I talk, the way that I react, the way that I communicate, my relationships with other people, with animals, with the planet, with myself. I'm always trying to be a better version of myself. And the more that I find out, the less I realize that I'm not perfect, but I'm also not imperfect.
Right.
I hate that word of, oh, you're imperfect. I'm just me. I am just who I am in this space, on this planet. This is who I am. And I will try to evolve as much as I can as a human being to be a better version of myself. And that evolvement will never, ever end, because it's endless. There's no such thing as being perfect. So I will never be perfect. And there's no such thing as imperfect. So I'll never be imperfect. But the key is to be happy in the moment. The reason a lot of people get very, very depressed and miserable, number one, they live in fear. And they live projecting things in the future. And when those future things that they're projecting don't come to fruition, they get very disappointed in themselves. So I project things in the future that I want. Obviously, manifestation is one of the most powerful things. So I'm constantly projecting what I want. But I also openly accept what comes. And I'm very grateful for what comes, And that gives you, there's a book that I read a while ago, and it says you have to be like water. And that's moving through life like water, which means adapting. You come across a rock and you move around it, and you're constantly moving and adapting. If you want to go in a direction and you get to this rock and it's not what you wanted, you can't just stop there. You just move. I wasn't supposed to get that. I wasn't supposed to go through that rock. I wasn't supposed to win that show. I wasn't supposed to get that house, but hey, I got this house. I was supposed to get that car, but I got this car. Or maybe I have no car.
Right.
But whatever it is, you have to put everything out there, work as hard as you possibly can, and then be very grateful for what comes back to you. So it's working on self-awareness and self-empowerment on every aspect of yourself as a human being.
No, it's great that you said that. And, you're talking about perspective. It's a hard thing to do, especially if we're not trained in that way. And so many of us aren't, because, it's cause and effect. I want to win the show. I want to get the job. I want to drop the 10 pounds, or I want to get the raise. And then that doesn't happen. And prior to that, we've cultivated belief that it's going to happen. And that becomes the one only and the end all be all, right? It's the alpha omega. And when it doesn't happen, it's just shipwreck falls emotionally. And it's really unique for you to talk about gratitude at that level, because when we talk about resistance, whether it comes in the forms of conditioning, it comes in the forms of what we eat and put in our bodies, what we abstain or discipline ourselves not to eat, at least on a frequent basis, all the way to enduring a lot of pain. That's forms of resistance, and that resistance ultimately serves its purpose. But we misconstrue that sometimes when we go through our own hardships. And without doubt, it's easy to see why people have such a very different, position, and why you've been able to have the kind of success, because, your mindset is really programmed to see the silver lining in everything, and to take something that someone throws at you and use it to be turned into a gem, and then you sell it, and it, something that someone threw at you to rain on your parade, you clean up and it becomes somebody else's shining light. And I think that that's remarkable. It's a remarkable skill, because you do have to work at it, but it's also a very unique in its decision, Gidget, because that's really what it is. It's you waking up and being the light that you are, and having such a very proactive and very uplifting and encouraging mindset. So this is awesome.
I will say this about bodybuilding and competing. It has taught me so much. And the things that I've learned in bodybuilding, I've realized and applied some of them to my life. It's taught me a lot of discipline. It's taught me to push past on the days that I've been exhausted. It's taught me to really focus on what I want. It's taught me to step on stage and disconnect from what other people think of me as far as the entire audience and the judges, and focus on my own inner being and what I'm bringing to that stage. So it's taught me to be very confident about my physique, my body. So many people have so many insecurities about their bodies. We're all flesh. We're all bone. We're all water. We're all oxygen and energy when you break it down. Physically, society has taught us that certain physiques are more desirable than others. In my opinion, that's a bunch of BS. If you go to Africa in Africa, a lot of them, I'm considered anorexic. They look at me like I'm crazy, and they love the big African women. The bigger your hips, the more you're considered desirable because you're childbearing and you be a good mother. So it changes all over the world. So we have this distorted kind of view. But competing's taught me to be I grew up with a lot of insecurities about my body, and competing taught me to love my body, to appreciate my body, to respect my body. So, and it's taught me so many good things that when I take all those things, I'm able to even apply those things to my life, because it's almost like you step on that stage and it's like everything is amplified. Everything is amplified in competing. It's almost like it just gets thrown right back in your face, and you can take it and you can come away from it weaker, or you can take it and realize, wow, I can take all these things that I just learned from this experience and apply it to the rest of my life. So, I wanted to say that competing has been probably one of and just the whole experience, from the dieting to the training to stepping on stage to being judged to winning to losing. I've actually learned more about myself when I lost. Because when I won, I was so busy celebrating that I didn't think of it. But when I lost, that's when I learned a lot. And the lessons I learned were priceless. And I've been able to take a lot of that into my life and just in general.
True. When you win, you celebrate, and when you lose or when you defeat, you reflect, right? And so it is awesome. I will definitely second what you say about competing. If you have the right mindset.
The right mindset. Yeah.
It will. So that's really up to the individual. I have one more question for you. But before I do that, I want to also create an opportunity for everybody to learn a little bit more about you. So, Gidget, how can the people find out more about what you're doing regarding your documentary, the IFBB bikini competitions, what you do as a performance enhancement specialist, as well as all of the other millions of great, wonderful things that you do in business? How can people connect with you?
On my Instagram account, I'm going to be a lot more active on my Instagram account. And on my Instagram account, which is Gidget Migliaccio, you just probably type in Gidget, M-I-G, you'll find me. And from there, I'm also building a YouTube channel. I've filmed about 200 videos, so we're in the process of editing them, and we're going to be uploading them. I'm going to be, putting a lot of just information that I've been wanting to share with people for a long time, but just my other businesses kind of took me away from it, and I've just not had the time to do it because I don't want to put out information that's just, not valuable. I really want to put out stuff that I think will be inspirational and valuable and take the time to really put this information out. So if you go to my Instagram account, it will direct you to my YouTube account and everything. And definitely I will be on there a lot more.
Wonderful. Excellent. We'll have that loop down in the show notes so people can get a chance to actually click the links and go from there on Instagram. And if you guys are watching this on iTunes or Spotify or any of the other platforms, then make sure you guys are definitely visiting these platforms on my YouTube channel, the NattFitness Method. You can actually type in and see all these wonderful things that Gidget is a part of and get connected to some content. So before I ask my last question again, Gidget, what I want to do is I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
As a whole, a lot of people can look at a woman from your past and, easily go, paradox with it, go 180 degrees in the opposite direction. And you chose to walk in the light. And as a reason, you become an ambassador, not just in fitness and not just in business and not just in performance enhancement, and because of all these things, you become an inspiration to so many people. And I acknowledge you for it. So thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Here's my last question. You're given an opportunity to talk to the world. Every boy, every girl, child, grandparent, elder, middle-aged individual, and adolescent is listening. They can hear your voice or they can see you. And you have 1 minute to talk and communicate with the world. What would you say?
I would say believe in yourself above all else, like 100%. If there's something you can think about that you want to do or accomplish, just do it. And the way that you do it is by creating habits for yourself on a daily basis. It's those small little habits. It's me getting up in the morning and deciding to have my protein shake and going to the gym. It's daily habits that accumulate and end up manifesting into your dream, whatever that dream is. So start with having a very clear vision of what it is you want out of your life, and then set the plan in motion by creating the daily habits to get there. It's very simple. There's no big magic trick to it. The harder you work, the more you'll get out of it. You get what you put into your life. Yeah, there's some people that are lucky and there's some people that are gifted, but most of us have to work very hard for what we want out of life. Don't look at something as an end game. Look at it as enjoy the journey, and at the end of it all, enjoy the rewards, and always constantly have a dream of some sort that you're pursuing. Because if you don't have that dream and that passion that motivates you to wake up every single day, to push forward another day, to get to where you want to be, to where you want to wake up tomorrow, you kind of lose this luster for life. You lose it, So try to find out what it is that you really want, and just start with very simple things. Don't complicate anything. And the number one thing that I will say that has taught me so much in life is to live your life with gratitude every single day. I went to Manila and I put myself in situations because I'm always attracted to poverty. So in Africa, I'll go to like the poorest areas and schools, and I'll try to work with the kids there. And I went to a school in Manila, PCF school, but it was the kids that were at the school. They came from a neighborhood called Tondo, and I went into Tondo, and it was literally the most horrendous poverty I've ever seen. I can still smell how bad it was because there's no toilets, there's no water, there's no electricity. These people build their homes out of trash. They live in trash. They eat trash. I watched an old man with just a pair of raggedy shorts bent over it, going through a trash bag, and two little kids, a little girl and a little boy with no clothes on because they had no clothes. And he was giving them chicken bones, and I could smell the sour disgustingness of the chicken bones. And these little kids were chewing the chicken bones. And just that experience changed my entire life. I was like, I will never, ever complain about anything in my life, ever. Just even the air that I breathe. They don't even get to breathe that. And then they have all these, monsoons or what, not monsoons, but like floods and stuff that come and wash away their homes. And they got to go look for more. And they literally go to Smoky Mountain, which is a big, huge, giant pile of trash. You'll see when they come and they dump off the trash dumpsters, there's a whole bunch of little kids standing there waiting to go through the trash because they'll recycle the plastic for 50 cents or something. Little kids that don't go to school going through trash. And it just changed my perspective on life forever. And literally the one word I will always, always come back to is gratitude. Gratitude. I've heard people complain, oh my God, I don't have a car. What am I going to do? I've heard people get stressed out about I don't have a fridge, or I don't have this. Or I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Who cares? You still have oxygen you can breathe. You have water. You have a roof over your head. You have clothes. You have food. Always look at what you have and not what you don't have. It doesn't mean you don't have to strive. I want every nice little thing I can possibly get my hands on, because I deserve it, because I work for it, and I want it because it's a beautiful world out there and there's so many beautiful things, and I want to be able to share whatever I get with as many people around me. But at the end of the day, I want to wake up grateful. And that's the one word that I will always come back to, no matter where I am in my life. Gratitude.
That is incredible, Gidget. Really
and love. Is. Love is the other word, of course.
And love. Gratitude and love. And we just keep going. We just keep listing off the articles. I acknowledge you. I acknowledge you for your honesty and your transparency. And by all means, it has been the biggest privilege to have the opportunity to connect with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I feel the exact same way about you. You're such a good listener. You're so easy to talk to, and you have such an amazing energy and vibe about you. I just love you.
I'm going to go float on air now. Okay. Thank you so much, lady. Listen, you guys, if there's anything that you could pick up, take your pick about the numerous things that Gidget has endured, the decisions she's made, and overall, more importantly, the things that she has to talk about, whether it be her ability to see light in a grim situation or her ability to persist and to go after what it is she's wanted. She's a perfect example that if you're hungry enough and you understand the vision behind the things that you want and the meaning of those visions, then anything with the right strategy and the right amount of commitment is beyond possible. This is Nicholas Natt signing off of the NattFitness Method. Until next time, my friends, level up your life. Talk to you later.